Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and today's video is going to be the best Tide offlane build for patch 7.38c. Then for starting items, we have one set of Tango, Magic Stick, 3 branches, and a Gauntlet of Strength. Like I always say these days, everybody is starting with Magic Stick. This is just great for most of these core heroes that like to spam spells. We really only have one extra Iron Branch that eventually we're going to build into our Magic Wand, but we have this just for the extra bit of stats, and also we can eat this if we need extra regen before we really send ourselves more Tangos if we need to. And then the Gauntlet of Strength is great because it gives us the option of building into Bracer or Soul Ring. And you notice I have Soul Ring here as a situational item because this item is not being favored as much. People are really going Bracer as a default and then really only going for Soul Ring if they feel like it's a good Vlad's game. And Vlad's is a core item, which I'll talk about in a minute, but people aren't going this every single game. They're preferring to go Mage Slayer almost every single game, and honestly, even going Mage Slayer first. So if you do go Mage Slayer first, that's giving you the mana regen and the farming potential with attack speed and all that stuff that you want. So you don't necessarily have to go for Soul Ring because you're not going to be getting that early Vlad's, that early lifesteal, and you're not even going to be going for Vlad's every single game. But in general, then, for early game items, we're going to have an inventory that looks something like this, and maybe even this extra Iron Branch sitting here or not at all. And then you can go straight into your core item, the first one being Mage Slayer. So you can build up all those small items along the way. So you can obviously stop back for infused raindrops, maybe even a Windlace, but that's not typical on this hero because these items are usually pretty easy to build into with Ring of Basilius, with Morbid Mask. So you're going to fill up your inventory slots generally, or even with the Mage Slayer with like an Orb of Venom or a Glove of Haste and those kinds of things. But the typical core item build is going to be Mage Slayer into Vlad's, into Blink, and then Shard. Shard is a must eventually at some point. You might even want to get Shard a little bit earlier, just depending on how good of a game it is. But this is the core item build in almost every single game. And like I said, going Mage Slayer first seems to be typical now, and then going Vlad's in most games, but some games you may just skip Vlad's because you feel like you really don't need it for that lifesteal, for the tankiness, and it doesn't really benefit your team that much in certain situations. So then you go right in for the Blink and the Ags, and then you go into your late game items after that. And then after you have an inventory that looks like this, you have two main routes that you can go, and the default is actually just going to be this first one, late game control. We're going to get rid of our wand probably, or maybe our bracer. We're going to get Shivas, and this is default in probably 80 to 90% of games. Shivas is good almost every single game, so you do want to buy that. It's great on this hero. And then from there, if we just feel like we need more control, we need more lockdown, you know, maybe Ravage isn't enough, we go for the Scythe of Ice, and we usually want to get this before we get Refresher Orb, because in the past, if you remember, Shiva's had a lot of intelligence that it would give us, but now the build is very different. So we only get 5 intelligence. It's really not great for beefing up our mana, and we're going to need more intelligence, more mana, and mana regen if we're going to want to use Refresher, because our mana pool is pretty small, and you know, having this ultimate plus Refresher plus another ultimate and any of these other spells we want to cast, that takes a lot of mana. So that's why we kind of have to get Scythe of Ice before we get Refresher. Now, it's not mandatory, but if you want to go like an early Refresher Orb, you have to realize all you really can do is blink in, ult, refresh, ult. That's like all you're going to be giving in the fight. Maybe like 1 or 2 other spells max. So just be aware of that. So you can obviously round this out where you have these 2 items and then go for Refresher and probably sell your Vlad's because it's a cheaper item, and this will be your inventory later, and then ultimately Overwhelming Blink. This is definitely a late game inventory that is pretty standard on the hero. Maybe even super ultra late game, we would sell the Mage Slayer and then go for one of these other right click or luxury items. That's definitely an option. And then that leads us to reset our items back to the core items and going on this different path. Now, the first path we can go on is if we went for the tankiness facet where we get more damage block, we can get rid of our wand, get rid of our bracer, go S and Y, and then go right into heart. And now we're so hard to bring down. We don't do as much damage, but we're just a beast in the fight. We're so tanky. We're doing so much damage because we just outlast everybody and we reduce their damage. We have the threat of Ravage. We have Dead in the Water we can use multiple times. We're slowing people. We're reducing their armor. This build is just ridiculous, especially if you have insane damage block. Now, this can still work if you go for Krill Eater, but it's not as good. I would say you may still want to go back for S and Y, but then we start building in to more damage or more potential right-click items. And you still see that I have Shivas here. This is also a potential thing, but if we still want to go for S and Y and even get Shivas, we're starting to kind of delete some of our items to go for more right-click. So we could get rid of the Mage Slayer, go for AC. We can get rid of Vlad's. We can go for Satanic. We could even potentially, now this might not be a great thing, we could get rid of our blink, or we could even get rid of our boots and go for like Daedalus, and then maybe instead of getting the swift blink or overwhelming blink, we'll get swift blink. That's definitely an option to have this as our inventory. That's kind of an insane late game right click inventory, but it's rare that we're ever really going to get to this point because that's a lot of money to spend, a lot of items to then sell. But this still could be like a late game inventory. I still might even make this my late game inventory, you know, slowing people with both of these, running in, doing insane AoE with Anchor Smash. But you can see how this could be more of the right-click inventory late game. But that's sort of the two options that we have to go. Do we want to go for control, or do we want to go for late game carry / damage, especially depending on what facet we want? Do we want to go mainly for tankiness or mainly for right-click damage? Then lastly, for situational items, like I said, you can go Soul Ring instead of the Bracer, and that would be more if I'm just going right into Vlad's and I'm going for the more right-click centric, you know, path, and maybe even skipping Mage Slayer, maybe even skipping Shivas and just going right for these S and Y like items, the even Deso and that kind of stuff. But that could be grief in the off lane. Just be wary. That's more of like the carry Tide build, which is still semi-popular, semi-viable. I just wouldn't be going that for the most part in the off lane. That's why I have Soul Ring as situational. That's why Deso is situational. That's why even BKB, Daedalus, Satanic, these are all situational because they're super, super late game luxury items that we don't really need to be going in many different games. Then Ags is the one where this is actually more of the late game control item, but it's also situational, mainly because you actually want to have Gush be a single target spell in a lot of different games because Dead in the Water is so great and this will break Linken's. That's why this is actually kind of situational in some games, in a lot of games late game, because these days people will actually build into Linken's just for Dead in the Water. So that's why you don't necessarily want to buy Ags every single game if you're going for the late game control. And then we have other weird situational things like Blade Mail, because this is a tanky hero, you can definitely buy that, but it's not great. You know, this is the Arcane Boots into Guardian Greaves build, which is an older build on the hero, but it's still semi-viable to buy things like Guardian Greaves, to buy things like Pipe and Crimson Guard and Heaven's Halberd and Lotus Orb. You can totally do this, but it's not great. You'd rather go for one of these other paths. And then Linken Sphere, obviously, if there's a Doom or something else that's just preventing you from getting off your spells, you can totally buy that, but you'd rather still get a lot of tankiness or other use out of these item slots than just going for Linken's. Then in terms of skill build, we're going to be going Gush level 1 pretty much every game. Now, yes, you could go for Anchor Smash level 1. That is viable, but I think Gush is just the default. We should be going for aggressiveness at the runes, for aggressiveness level 1. Like, if you Gush somebody and they're far away from tower, whether it's the support or even the carry, depending on where the wave is, you can just chase them down. They have less armor. You can catch up to them. You can do insane damage. Your support obviously can get those right clicks in. They could potentially stun or get their spell in. And then if you hit level 2 and now you have Anchor Smash and Gush, you are a formidable force. Yes, you're not as tanky, so you do need to be a little bit careful here because these three spells are very good. So maybe if you feel like it's a super defensive lane, you're not going to get Gush. You're just going to get Anchor Smash level 1, then Kraken Shell level 2, and then kind of bounce between them and only get Gush later on. But I still would probably get 1 point in Gush most games. And then we're going to get 2 points in Anchor Smash at level 3, especially if we get Gush. Otherwise, we're going to get 2 points in Anchor Smash, 1 point in Kraken Shell level 3. And then we're going to go back for Anchor Smash, maxing that out, and then getting ult whenever we can, maxing out Kraken Shell second, because Gush level 1 is really all we want. We don't need to max this out, even if we take it early. So getting ultimate whenever we can and then maxing out Gush. Then for talents, we're going to be going for the right talent just because we are focusing around being more of a right-click hero because we're going to be going for Krill Eater most of the time. And even though you're going tanky, even though you're going control, you still want to focus a little bit more on the Anchor Smash damage and the damage reduction and Anchor Smash affecting buildings and 50% Anchor Smash on attack. So even if you go, like I said, this control build, having that focus on doing damage is still very good, and it also gives you the option, if you want, once you get these talents, to go in for these late game damage type items as well. So that's why we do want to be getting all the Anchor Smash talents in the talent tree. So that, everybody, is the best Tidehunter offlane build for patch 7.38c. As always, if you like the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.